Myself this winemaker.
Hey, hey, welcome to Wine Talks
Hi.
with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with the great Ryan Kemp from Adelaida Vineyards. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks available on Pandora, iHeartRadio, wherever you hang out for your podcasting, and sponsored by the original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Sweet and Rosé series of clubs, wines, whatever. Hey, listen up for a show coming out with Jose Balbo from the famed Susana Balbo Winery in Argentina. Great conversation about a young ascent in the wine business. And have a listen to this you are listening to this, so I can't even say that. Another show that's really fun to listen to is Steven Spurrier from the great Judgment of Paris. Go find that episode. You're going to enjoy the concept and the history. But and by the way, rate us, would you? We need some ratings. So go out there, just give me a 5 stars. If you don't want to give me 5 stars, don't give me nothing. All right. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. It's really exciting.
This is an extemporaneous introduction, so I sort of stumbled over. But you know, we were chatting and laughing when you first walked in, so I know that we're gonna have a good time on the conversation what we're doing there. But one of the things we were talking about early was that you had the affinity to be in the film business. And look at now you're on the set with all those LED lights and microphones and everything.
This is as close as I ever got to the film biz.
It's unbelievable.
So I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
You're ready for your close-up now?
Exactly. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that was my original passion and goal in life. It's still a huge passion of mine. I see every movie I possibly can. I'm happy to talk to you about all the newest releases and all that kind of stuff. But when I made my way out to LA to kind of pursue that part of my career, I worked at a pizza and wine bar and found myself kind of diving into the wine list more than finding my next gig in the industry. So I knew that was not where my head was at. So I decided to go back to school and do wine and vit, and got my first harvest job, and now we're here.
So you didn't start a pizza store then? Because you had a choice at that point.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, I would have. Starting a pizza place is great. That's definitely a way to make money.
I just learned actually on the news this morning, because the guy that got hit by a baseball at a Yankees game used the opportunity, the notoriety to get on the news and promote his slice shop.
Oh, right.
You ever heard the term slice shop for a
slice
pizza place?
Shop for just slices. They don't sell whole pizzas.
I didn't know it existed.
Just a slice shop.
We're West Coast people.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't understand this stuff. So that's interesting. But let's go back to the film business for a second. I mean, I was intrigued by it. I was actually accepted in the USC Film School. I had great letters of rec from people in the industry, and I was told, look, you're in business school already, and you want to go to film school. What are you going to get out of it? You're going to be a gaffer or a grip, no matter what you do anyway. What part of it was intriguing to you?
So I wanted to do production, which I think in more producing side. So, working in a winery, there's a lot of day-to-day logistics, and I do feel like a production
that's true, yeah.
Operations and that kind of stuff on a regular basis. But that was something that really intrigued me. So I really like to, be the person on set with headphones, running around with their head cut off like a chicken. That was sort of my goal, was to kind of have eyes and ears everywhere on the sets. But producing or, production manager, that kind of stuff was my goal. I spent a lot of time working on commercials and, crappy reality TV shows and stuff like that, only to realize that was not my bag. So.
I've been trying to find an episode from a show called The Music Thing, which was sort of a Soul Train sort of knockoff, and I was in it.
What?
Yeah, I was on the show, and I watched the show after they recorded it, and I cannot, for the life of me, even find that the thing even existed. But I know I was on it, unless it was a dream or something. In fact, I was late to work. My dad got mad at me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I never made it on to screen, but yeah.
There's something something very intoxicating about it. And,
yes.
If you go on our YouTube channel, you'll see 3 shorts that I did with David Zucker, the famed shame director.
Cool.
And there was this fluke, and I won't tell you, the story's too long, but I ended up showing up at a house. They were going to shoot 3 different scenes. It was about wine. Mm-hmm. And I walked in the door. I had written the scripts like 3 years earlier, and I see a production crew, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's 2 4K cameras, there's a script girl, there's a gaffer, grip, lighting, sound. I'm like, I should have learned the lines. I hadn't even looked at it. I hadn't looked at it for.
This is a real production.
I got this extras. We had 2 extras.
Yeah.
Anyway, why did you end up in Paso though? That's a kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, totally. So the goal was to go back to school, and I really wanted to get an education on it, just because I didn't know anybody in the wine industry, but I knew I was really interested in it. So one weekend, I went with a friend of mine, and we went to go. And we had our eyes set on taking a tour of Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, checking out their program, checking out the town, seeing what it was like. The first day I went to go get my tour, and I was informed that Cal Poly doesn't do second bachelor's, and I already have a bachelor's degree in film and video production, and I definitely was not going to get into the graduate program. So I was like really just bummed out. I was, this was my plan. I didn't want to go as far as Davis, because at least with San Luis Obispo, I was really close to my friends and community in LA. And so we stopped in a tasting room in that area in Paso Robles, and a gentleman told me about Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria. So I did a junior college degree in wine and vit there, and it was a wonderful 2.5 years, not the 4 years that it would have been at Cal Poly. I had a great education. I met some wonderful people, and one of the professors I had there was an old-time vineyard manager for some of the bigger guys, like some Constellation Vineyards and such. Wealth of knowledge, was retired, had worked in Paso Robles since he was a kid, and had some connections in Paso, and suggested that I work at Eberly for my first harvest. Mm-hmm. So I got the connection there, and I worked my first harvest at Eberly, and just fell in love with Paso specifically. There's a great camaraderie and a great passion for winemaking and for doing, things right by the community in the area. And I felt really at home in that climate, in that area. So I stayed in Paso. Yeah.
It's cool about Paso, and we've been hanging out there a long time. My dad did the Martin Brothers wines. We go back that far. A lot of Italian varietals back then. But it's still rural, it's got a rodeo. I mean,
Absolutely.
what else do you want?
The California Mid-State Fair is in Paso Robles,
that's
that's really close to my house. So that time of year, it always has this wonderful smell of horse poop in the air.
Oh, that's super.
Yeah, there's definitely still these wonderful qualities about Paso, and I think that there's a younger generation of people that are, flooding into Paso and working at the wineries, and also in ag all around there. But there is this older generation, that's tried and true to Paso and its history, and its making sure that it's authentic. So
it used to be. Well, first of all, is the bowling alley still there down a little close?
No. So unfortunately, the bowling alley is not there, but it was just through, COVID. Everyone went through some issues.
I should have bought it. It was for sale like 20 years ago, and I've got this fascination with Americana that way.
Exactly.
Fiberglass seats and long neck buds. So is there anything in the building at all? Or
no, not since I've driven past it.
Might be available.
But
check
exactly.
But that is one of the attractions of Paso. And my wife and I had bought 60 acres in the early 2000s, thinking we would retire there and build a house at Martingale Circle over behind on Highway 46. But it wasn't for us. It's not my lifestyle. It's not. We thought it was, and so it takes a certain. You're talking about the camaraderie, not only amongst the winemakers and the vintners, but just the population.
Absolutely.
It takes a certain person, and it's wonderful that you were attracted to it.
I think that one of my favorite things about Paso that I think will never change. I hope it never does, but we have some really amazing restaurants and hotels. And the infrastructure is there, for this wonderful wine region that people are really starting to, notice and, take real interest in. But we have these really nice, amazing restaurants that, you can go dressed just as nice and as fancy as you want, but there will be a table across from you or on the other side of the restaurant, and the gentleman is still wearing his cowboy boots and his cowboy hat and, jeans and or a baseball cap and things like that. I think there's this idea of never taking yourself too seriously in Paso, because what we do is really fun, and agriculture in general, having the, ability to be outside and not, be stuck behind a desk a lot is, something that people take for granted. And I don't think it happens in Paso. So,
I mean, you can stop at James Dean's crash site on the way in if you want to.
Exactly.
That's really important stuff, right?
No. There's lots of great,
You said something important, though, the change downtown, even in the last 15 years since we bought the property, and I couldn't believe the quality of the restaurants. I mean, it used to be cowboy shops and thrift stores.
Absolutely.
And now there's
those are still there, but there's also some other fantastic places. And one of the big things that I've been in Paso for 8 years now, so I've seen a huge growth in the downtown area and the hotels and the restaurants. But I think that it's only going up from here. This is not even, close to the peak of where we'll see Paso.
So how do we keep it rural? I mean, not this, especially the answer to the question from a political standpoint or a planning standpoint, but how do we keep it rural? How do we not make sure it doesn't turn into, not dissing Napa, but it's become very commercial and very expensive to go there?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of, there's a lot of still the hometown hotels that are at a relative price. And then we also have all of the Airbnbs and the local community that's trying to, make sure that people can stay there, and have an authentic experience. The B&Bs that are at wineries, those can lean to be a little bit more expensive, but there's also plenty of them that are out there on the west side. And I think also, at Adelaida, the Van Steenwyck family actually owns over 1,800 acres on the west side of Paso Robles. And actually only less than 10% of that is planted to vine. So you have, this desire to keep it with the natural chaparral and those natural plants and animals that are in that area. I think that's super important to the community. I think that the signs of planting new vineyards is a sign of growth, and I'm not afraid of that. I think that that is bound to happen, but I think that at a certain point we have to kind of look back and understand that not all of this needs to be planted. We can actually survive on what we have here, and it's more important to, keep a sense of authenticity and history in Paso. Paso is, flipped through quite a bit of different ag programs. Originally we had almonds and walnuts, and now we're moving into sort of much more grapevines, and almonds and walnuts have gone out to the Central Valley more. Although at Adelaida, we do have a large walnut orchard that's almost 100 years old. So I think realizing that, winemaking and planting grapes is incredibly important, and it's a sign of growth, but also we need to stick to our roots and understand that not every square inch of Paso Robles needs to be planted.
Square footage, man. We can't. We got to raise the rent.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you bring any walnuts with you?
No, I didn't.
Jesus.
But I know.
Had I known?
Dang. Yeah, so the walnuts are fantastic.
Pistachios too, right?
It's crazy. Yes, there are pistachios, but it's not as common to find as the walnuts and almonds.
Yeah. So, and of course, you have beautiful the vacation destination San Miguel that everybody looks for. Nordstrom's and Macy's over there. Just joking. It's like my parents used to live in Julian, which is like not the edge of the world, but you can see it from there. And he went through Aguanga or some town. I told my folks, we had to stop at Nordstrom's in Aguanga. I was like, no such thing.
No.
So I want to talk about the districts a little bit, because I think that's a really important part. And we were just talking about with Paul here, the Adelaida appellation, and as these appellation designation is difficult to get, the Fed government has quite a few tasks you got to accomplish in order to do that.
Yes. Yeah, the newest one actually is Slow Coast. So that is a newest appellation, or the newest AVA that's in the Paso area. But Adelaida District, which is where Adelaida Vineyards and Winery is located. So we had to give permission to use the name. Adelaida Vineyards and Winery is number 9 in Paso Robles. There's now close to 300 different tasting room and wineries.
Really? Wow. That's great.
Yeah, so we've been through it all with Paso. I've seen the development of these AVAs. So Adelaida District, Willow Creek District, Templeton Gap, Geneseo and Estrella. We're out on the east side of Paso. But it's just really mind-boggling, all these different microclimates that can exist in all of these different AVAs, which, I think that makes Paso Robles such a distinguished wine region. Any wine, you could have the same varietal of the same vintage from even just certain sections even in the Adelaida district, and you're talking about this incredibly different ripening experience of the fruit and flavor profiles and palates that can come from
Is
the
this
wines.
new coastal appellation, is that where Ancient Peaks is?
No. So Ancient Peaks,
further-
Paul, I'm going to reach out to you here. Santa Margarita.
I thought it was further.
Yeah, it's south.
Okay,
yeah,
south.
yeah, Santa Margarita area.
I'm looking at the map here on my iPad, and I can't remember when, but I know that Creston was around for a while. Paso Robles, Estrella has been around. Our property was on Estrella River Road. But the job of the feds and anybody that wants to create an appellation, and I had a conversation like this about not Templeton, but the Petaluma Gap. You've got to show that there's something different about it. And you just mentioned that tasting varietals from different. Now, if you were to ask the general consumer, what's up with Paso? What are they? What would you recommend? That's what if you ask them. I'm talking about a esoteric question. They're going to say, "Oh, big, rich, fat, overdone, over-extracted, stuff like that." And that's not what it is.
It isn't. But I do think that there was a history of Paso doing that, and I think that there's a lot of it's still happening, and it still gets done, and it's a certain type of wine that I think that has a place, and some consumers really enjoy. And I think with Adelaida, I think we've been around. Our first vintage was in 1981. So I think we've seen these changes in the winemaking process in Paso. And I think we've really stuck to ourselves and continue to make elegant wines that are reflective of the sense of place in which they've come from. So I think because it gets so hot in Paso, that's one of the reasons why it's so easy to make higher alcohol wines, a little bit bigger and more extracted wines, as we kind of start to focus on, there are certain aesthetics that, people immediately think about with wine, the smell and the look. So the color and the smell of wine is something that people originally think of. So with that, getting these super dark colors and aromatics and flavors can happen, as in these hotter temperatures and as things hang a little bit longer. And then you also get these higher alcohol wines, which I think became kind of a thing for Paso, which still hold a place. And there's still loads of, people that enjoy those wines, and they're still very important to our area. But at Adelaida, we try and, make sort of fresher wines. We do, because of our limestone soils, we have no shortage of acid in our wines, which, we've talked about earlier. And I really enjoy that, that freshness and that quality that naturally exists in our wines. And we really like to show that off. Yeah.
I think at this realm that the acid is the backbone of the wine, and it's so important to have a decent acid structure. But there's so many different types of structures that taste bad. I had 2 samples today before you came, and they're very acidic, and they're awfully acidic. Not the acid tasted bad,
Right.
like it just wasn't pleasant to drink. And here we drink this wonderful, easy for me to say. Wonderful Cabernet Franc that you produced, which is again an interesting varietal. You don't see a lot of it from Paso, though I think Patrimony makes a Cabernet Franc too.
Yeah,
right?
so Cabernet Franc is gaining some traction in Paso. I would say that it's underrated in Paso Robles. It's definitely, I think, on the rise in the area. And Adelaida, in fact, has just planted a couple more acres to Cab Franc because we really believe in its heat tolerance and its drought tolerance. So we're very passionate about Cab Franc and Cab Sauv as well. So I'm glad that you found the acidity in the Cab Franc to be, one of the positive qualities about the wine. I think that it helps it age. So in a goal of winemaking is, I want you to enjoy the wine now, but I also want you to enjoy the wine, 10 years from now in a different room with different people and have a completely different experience. So I think the acidity and also lower alcohol can help in those aging qualities of the wine.
Well, it's all about balance, and there's plenty of fruit in that. A little brash youngster, even though it was a 2019, still had tons of life, and certainly I think your longevity idea is going to be perfectly fine for that wine.
Yeah,
I don't
great.
have to worry about that. Because we're going back, and this is interesting, because the Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, which tend to be Cabernet, of course, everybody knows, Austin Hope, and the other brands that make it. But it wasn't always like that in Paso. They were experimenting with stuff, and I was looking back at my dad's notes, knowing you were coming in. We did a Nebbiolo from Martin Brothers, and then Martin and Wayrick became part of that. I mean, there was lots of experimenting going on, and then you bring in a Peak Pool, which is like probably the least planted grape in America, right?
Yeah. So I think that originally, I think Paso was really known for Zinfandel. Zinfandel is a heritage varietal in California. There are a lot of older vineyards, as I'm sure you know, the Uberoth vineyard in Paso Robles that are Zinfandel. So I think that Paso Robles was Zinfandel, and then we had some Cabernet float in, but I think more recently it's become sort of a powerhouse for the Rhone varietals, especially Rhone white and red varietals. Adelaida does have Rhone white and red varietals planted. Peak Pool Blanc has started to gain traction in Paso, and I am just really, really pushing for it to be one of the, I think people used to travel to Paso. Viognier was the white wine that was always presented to them as sort of the white wine of Paso, whereas I have lots of appreciation and love for Viognier. I've had some fantastic Viogniers. I don't necessarily think of Viognier when I think of the Paso Robles climate and what grows best. And, working at Adelaida and working with the varietal of Peak Pool Blanc, knowing that it's a later ripener and also it's a lot fresher and a lower alcohol white wine, which to me is just more palatable for, just in general, the temperature of Paso. So when you drink a white wine in the summer, Viognier is not necessarily what I think of for that area, and Peak Pool Blanc is being planted more often and made by some of our neighbors. And I think going to be sort of more of a white wine that you're going to see a lot more often in Paso if I have anything to do about it.
Well, I'm going to quote a famous winemaker. It's friggin' hot up there.
Yeah.
That's what you just said that earlier.
Yes, it is really friggin' hot. It's hot. But we have these really wonderful, the diurnal shifts of temperature that just make Paso the most amazing place, one of the most amazing places to have grapes in the United States, because we have these 100-degree days that then dip down to 50 to 55 degrees at night, allowing that fruit and those vines to bounce back from those temperatures, but also, really, creating compelling and complex aromatics and flavors.
I have to say, for the listeners, Peak Pool is a pretty obscure grape, particularly in California, but in France it's well known. It's not known for its not romanticism, but it's nobility. It's a nice drinking, quaffing wine. But my comment to you when I tasted it was I sensed the grape Peak Pool, which is that coming from the variety I've tasted from France, but with that little bit of body and depth that comes from Paso and the heat. So that's quite a thing. But I'm going to challenge you that's going to be I don't know. I get a lot of winemakers in here and they want to do something new with the grapes. And I think this is great. I love the idea. But boy, the marketplace is tough to turn on that. And it's going to take tasting room tastes and people saying, what is this? And you come out and wave the flag and, and cheer and stuff.
I'll be in all the tasting rooms and all the restaurants waving the flag.
Is it in the restaurants? Are people pouring it in the restaurants?
Yeah, like I've definitely seen Pico Blanc as a white. It's definitely in the section of the obscure whites.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that it is gaining much more traction. I do also believe that, Viognier isn't really a super easy sell either. So
it's not.
I think that, Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc are very easy sells as far as white wine is considered. I mean, it's amazing how long Syrah has been a popular varietal, and then Syrah is still sometimes difficult to sell. So I think that people will always be attached to the classics. There's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do is when somebody's looking for a Sauvignon Blanc, you can, point them into the direction of something that might just be that much more compelling and maybe just that much more different and esoteric that could also meet the palate needs of that person. But, provide just that much more to a meal or that much more to the person.
You're right on. Consumerism is tough.
Yeah.
This is what I do every day. It's slow. It's slow to change. But look, Sancerre right now, try and get it, right?
Yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc from a particular part of France that everybody wants. It's not impossible.
Yeah,
it isn't. And things change. And I think part of that is, look, wine is a 1-year cycle. You only get one chance a year, right? So that's like new vintage. We go market the new vintage. And then that vintage is done. We're going to market the next one. You can't make more. You can make more beer anytime you want to. You can make more, anything, whiskey anytime you want to, but you can only make so much time.
Which
and
is
it's agricultural.
why the winemaking business is so exciting.
Well, there's something, I'm going to talk about the Pinot Noir a second, and I want to dovetail off of that for a sort of more philosophical approach. But your Pinot was fabulous. Pinot being incredibly a conduit to wherever it's grown and what it does. And so Paso would not be known for Pinot Noir generally, but here's this wonderfully structured, full-bodied Pinot representing Adelaida, not only the district, but the wine. I mean, the winery. So who thought of that, one? And then what kind of comments are you getting from the consumers like, hey, this is a Pinot I've not tasted before. Like, it's not this light feminine thing.
So Dr. Stanley Hoffman in 1964 thought to plant Pinot Noir in Paso Robles. He also thought to plant Chardonnay and Cabernet. So we purchased the HMR Vineyard in the early 90s, and it is now a part of our estate. So this Pinot Noir that you tasted and that we have at Adelaida is the oldest Pinot Noir vine in the Central Coast and second oldest in California. So who thought of it was, someone who's no longer with us, and it's our job to take care of the vineyard and to produce the best Pinot that we can from that property, which is actually incredibly easy. It leans such really beautiful, tasty fruit, which I think is a really nice representation of just a different, of Pinot Noir in Paso. So like I said, it does get still really stinking hot in that area.
I like friggin' hot.
Friggin' hot. Okay, I know, I said friggin' hot. But, so it still gets really friggin' hot, so there's nothing I can say that'll prove that differently to you. We do get a little bit of ocean air. We are 14 miles to the ocean as a crow flies, but it's still warm. So I think that that actually leans to what you're describing, which, is a Pinot Noir that is that has really smooth, delicious tannins and has a little bit more of a complex nose and aromatics. So our Pinot, I feel like, is of the earth aromatics. So when I mean that, I mean, the main aromatic I get from our Pinot is the center of a freshly cut rose. So these earthy aromatics, sometimes we get a little mushroom, sometimes we get those sort of savory characteristics.
I sense that.
Yeah,
for sure.
and so I think that comes from the warmer climates that we have in Paso.
You don't have to convince me that it's freaking hot, because that was one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons, because this house we were going to build was upper plateau. This busted development by an insurance company. It was called Martingale Circle. It's still there. There's still properties there. And we bought this 2-tiered thing. And we went there how many times during the summertime? I go, man, it is freaking hot.
Yeah.
I use the same word. And we end up at the beach. We sold that property at the beach. So there's two reasons why. One was this is 2004 around with that huge glut.
Yeah.
Right? So the guy behind us had planted 60 acres, didn't pick any of it. Had no contracts, nobody cared. Just sat there. And so I was like, that doesn't seem very profitable. And it was really, really hot. Yeah. So the funny thing was that property was an old subdivision, and the CC&Rs on the property, the conditions of the property were set up by the county because they really didn't want 30-acre parcels. They was too small. But they said, okay, we'll do it under the following conditions. One of the conditions was no foil on your windows. Like you can't cover your no yards with clothes hanging visible. No property, no vehicles can be on the land unless it's on a pad of some sort, concrete or asphalt.
Oh, okay. Now I'm catching on.
Oh yeah. So these are all conditions of if you wanted to build a house, you either had to plant wet farm, which that was the guy next door never picked. Or stud horses, which I'm probably pretty bad at, so I didn't try to do that.
Yeah.
And then these other conditions of the house. And I said, screw it, I'll just go buy a house at the beach. So that's where we end up at the beach. But this is an interesting conversation. Paul and you are the only two people who have ever brought up HMR and being a fabulous and well-known property at the time and making Pinot Noir. And our friend Ed Maciana, who's been on the show many times, he writes my newsletters for me. And we're old friends. I was a kid when I met him. But he had copied a Domaine Romani Conti label for one of the HMR Pinots. And they got big trouble. They were told, I don't know what happened exactly, if they had to dump it or they just had to, they had to stop doing it. So, but that's not the point. What's interesting, and it's just based on what you just said, we actually were trying to copy Burgundy France all over the country, not only in Paso, but we were up in Oregon. They were trying to be Burgundian, and they couldn't make Burgundy there because it's not Burgundy. And we can't make Burgundy in the Adelaida district of Paso because it's not Burgundy. It makes Adelaida wines.
Yeah, I do think that there is some similarities in soils and there is some similarities in temperatures, but I do think that the rainfall is something that's different. And so, at Adelaida, we do practice dry farming, so that is going to lean to a different aromatic and flavor. But absolutely, I do think that, my biggest, I never want to try and make my version of someone else's wine. We always take inspiration and we always, take admiration for everything, but you're never going to be able to make, a wine from a different region in another region because, winemaking is not a recipe and it all comes from different kind of climates. So you're always going to yield something else. But however, I think that is really compelling about the, Adelaida Pinot is, here's a varietal that we have been told grows best in a completely different climate than Paso because of its quote unquote thin skins. And it's not a tough varietal. And unlike, Syrah that in school, I was always told that you could stick a Syrah vine in a boot in the desert and it would grow. Now, that's a gigantic, hyperbole. That's not really true. But, I mean, I think that Pinot does have thin skins. But I think that, it's been there and produced for us and given us fantastic wine. I think because we've cared for it and, it's the age that it is, it still survives on a dry farm vineyard and thrives for us.
Do you think a nurseryman told him the first he's like, you've lost your mind, you're going to Pinot Noir here?
Well, I don't think there there was many people around in
You know,
1964 to tell him that he lost his mind.
But isn't that what the New World's about? That we get to do whatever
Yeah,
we
we
want?
get to do whatever we want.
Try it.
Exactly. So there is Dr. Stanley Hoffman did hire a consultant, which is a very recognizable name, Andrei Chelachev,
Oh, yeah.
to
He's
come
been
and,
around a little bit.
tell him, what to plant and where to plant. And, it was consulted that these varietals would be, good in this area and should be planted on this location.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have Pinot Noir and we still have Chardonnay and we still make a Cabernet in that same area. And now Cabernet is incredibly successful and just really a great varietal on the west side of Paso too. So I do think that somebody in 1964 knew what they were doing.
That's pretty early on for Paso Robles. So
yes,
that's
yeah.
one of the beginnings.
Yeah.
What is your job? I mean, I don't mean that technically.
job?
You walk in this, but as a winemaker, as a philosophical winemaker, wine has this fabulous presence in our lives that's you can't really define. It's different than beer. It's different than, I say this all the time. It makes you feel something. It's to make you feel something, connect you somewhere, do something. Then
Yes.
It's very hard to define what that is, but it changes every year. But as philosophically, what are you trying to do in this career?
So I think I wanted to go into the wine industry and to learn how to make wine and to do that because, like a lot of people, I had and I still do have a very romantic vision of what wine does to people and what it does for people. Wine brings people together. When you're sad and alone, you rarely drink a bottle of wine. A lot of times you turn to whiskey or maybe beer or something slightly harder. So wine has a tendency to bring people together, to be shared with a big group of people. And I think that, I'm a positive person and I love good energy. And, I feel like what's so interesting about wine is you could be drinking the exact same bottle of the exact same wine, exact same vintage as someone else in the world, but you could be having quite a different experience with it as they can. So every bottle is different, even if it's the same wine. And the ability of wine to bring people together has always been very fascinating to me. I'm a people person. I like to talk, and it's easy for me to enjoy wine.
You said a mouthful there. A couple of things. One, the experience is so important. I had Maximilian Riedel on the show 2 days ago, and you want to understand the experience of wine or the difference between sitting in the front of the Parthenon or the Colosseum in Italy having a glass of wine, or being home and the kids are pulling on your shirt tails. That's two different experiences. Same wines are going to taste differently, but put them in different glasses. That's a sort of a microcosm of the same idea.
Absolutely,
and it changes everything. But you said something that's really cool because there's something about, and I can't define it, but wine connects to your soul to the ground. I believe that if it's properly made and it's not full of chemicals and altered to fit the shelves of Ralph's, it's got a philosophical and ethereal representation of something. To try to define that, and it's a creative process for you. And you were driven into the film business because it is creative. It's an intoxicating thing. It makes you feel good. Like I wish I could act better because I would try because when I watch good actors and actresses perform, I go, wow, that's so creative. How cool is that you can represent yourself that way? And you're doing the same thing though through a glass of wine.
Yes.
And you want people to go, wow, who made this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I don't necessarily expect anyone to wonder exactly like one specific person who made it, because I think in my opinion it's really important when you think about all the different people that actually had to do with the wine. So, like we have a full-time vineyard crew of 8 people, not including our, ranch manager. We have, the crew of 4 of us that work in the cellar, and during harvest we have, 2 interns, and all these people touch what you're trying. And it's very important, to understand that, there's quite a bit of blood, sweat, and tears that go into
That's
every
true.
bottle of wine that you drink.
true.
And it's just really exciting also, like, to think of this other life that the wine has had, you know, in the vineyard, or, you know, during dormancy before it even became a vine, or before, you know, bud break and all those kinds of exciting things.
I promised you a hard stop at 2:30. It's 2:30, but I want to.
It's, yeah. Yeah, please ask me another question. Or let's talk about something else.
No. Well, no, you made a good point, and there's a video on your website, which what's the website address?
So Adelaida.com.
Adelaida.com,
Yeah.
and it's it touches on that a little bit. Like, this is a romantic product, but behind it is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that make
Yes.
this happen. and one of the questions I have is take a long time to answer, and we're going to do it the next time, which is like, what are we trying to do here? We have this technology. We have sorters now. We have optical sorters and laser sorters, and they throw the lizards out when you berry pick. You've got phenolic, right? All these things that go into making a.
We don't have any lizards.
What does it mean? Well, that's what, you know. It's funny. Somebody said once, wine isn't vegan. There's like bugs on the grapes. They're crushing flies and stuff. That's not vegan. Okay, let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
This is a book written by a doctor in France. His name it's called "Wine is the Best Medicine." It's apparently curative properties of different wines, and so I want to see how close you're paying attention in school. So I'm going to give you a ailment, some ailment.
Okay.
I'll be nice. Pick a nice one, and then you have to tell me between the three choices which one of these wines might help you with that.
Okay.
Okay. So now they're all French wines, but you'll know the grapes just because it's a French doctor.
Okay.
So let's just say you have weakness of the liver. Just pick that up.
Might be
You could
drinking a
either
little too
have
much wine.
You could have a Saint-Emilion, which is Merlot, of course. You could have a Champagne, or you could have a Côte de Beaune, which would be Pinot Noir. Which one of those would help you with your weakness of the liver, which we probably all have being in this industry anyway?
Yeah. I don't know. Part of me says the bubbles, because I do think that, like, when I was younger and I had a stomach ache, like, my mom would always give me sparkling water or ginger ale or something of that nature to help with that. So
Your mom,
I'm gonna
your
go with
mom's
bubbles.
that was a very good connection, because that's right.
All right.
And
Shout out to
usually
Mom. Okay.
and then I was looking for the description of why, and I can't find it. But the dosage is 4 glasses a day.
Oof.
That's not so much.
That isn't. But, like, if you're drinking other things, because that's why your liver is in the ailment that it is, because you're drinking other things, and then
right.
you're having 4 glasses of bubbles.
My previous sales engineer, my previous sound engineer was my son-in-law, and he listened to so many champagne houses that he now is one of the most expensive habits I've ever passed on to my kids.
Oh.
Is drinking champagne all the time. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's been a great pleasure
drink a
having
lot
you
of
here.
that.
I hope we can do it again.
Yeah.
Maybe up at the winery next time.
I would love to. Yeah,
come
it
up.
sounds great. We have a beautiful property, and we'd love to show you around.
I'd love to be there. Thank you again.
Yeah.
And
Cheers.
have
Thank you.
Productive rest of the day.
Yes.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Print it. That was great.
Cool.
I knew it.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's harder, but that was much easier.
Yeah.